All right, man. Today is Thursday. It is February 2nd. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. I'm here with Chief again. Chief, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Ed. Well, kind of.
Why, kind of?
Well, I mean, I don't have any clothes. I'm just like this disgusting, can't wash any clothes. My dryer's broken. I'm just like digging through the bottom of the pile, buying clothes at Target, stealing clothes from here. It's tough.
Well, it's like a Groundhog Day thing? You don't wash your clothes on Groundhog Day?
I can't watch. Yeah, it's basically like every day I'm just like, well, I guess I'm going to be gross again today.
Well, I hope you're
apart.
So do you? I don't think you've talked about this though. Well. I assume you're going to talk about it.
Yeah,
in
yesterday's
episode.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll get into that. We're recording in reverse order today,
through the looking glass here
exactly.
a little bit. Yeah.
But we'll get to that. Well, we'll figure it out. Happy Groundhog Day, Chief.
Mm-hmm. It's a great movie.
Yeah, it is a great movie.
Yeah.
Woodstock, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Puxatawny Phil. Hopefully he sees a shadow. We've had a fucking pretty decent winter though, so we can't complain.
Yeah, I mean it was. Even today, like the sun was out. I think the temperature was like 8 degrees, but it was sunny. That was fine.
Which is rare.
Yeah, so I walked the dog. I could have walked the dog for 45 minutes if he wanted to. He doesn't want to. He's a fat piece of shit.
Oh,
fatter
George?
than me. Yeah,
He's hurting?
He's afraid of everything. So if he hears the L train in the distance, straight back home. Garbage truck, back home. Bus, motorcycle, whatever it is, any kind of loud disturbance, walks over and he just like beelines for the door.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's putting on some weight because he won't walk.
It's I also saw someone from New York, one of our New York coworkers, complain about no sun, and it's like, that's just like par for the course here.
That's our whole. It's like welcome to winter in Chicago. I also have you seen? I'm thinking about getting one of these. I've been thinking about getting one of these for years.
The UV lamps.
Yeah, and the ones that specifically will like serve as an alarm clock. So it like it gets like brighter and brighter and brighter until whatever time that you want to get up.
I'm aware of those. I don't have one.
I'm thinking about trying it out. I wish I could just like try it out and then like fuck this thing and send it back, but it is what it is.
Yeah, you'll get one.
Yeah,
at some point. Put it on your Amazon wish list.
It is.
Today's topic is fucking crazy.
Dude.
We've had this in the tickler file for a while.
For a few weeks,
with, winter break and whatnot. Mm-hmm. We weren't able to get through it. We just didn't have a right time to get to it, so we're getting to it now. That's why it's like kind of like a not an emergency Tuesday episode, but we're doing this on a Thursday instead of a Tuesday. We're squeezing it in.
It's an ongoing situation, and it's a situation that will always be ongoing one way or another. We're talking about the cartels versus the United States versus Mexican government, and sometimes it makes you think that they're all just in it together.
Yeah.
Because they are just this Sinaloa Cartel, which is everybody knows El Chapo. He was arrested. He was in a prison. He had the tunnel with a motorcycle at the bottom. He escaped. He got caught again. He got extradited to the United States, and I believe he's serving out a life sentence at a maximum security prison. I think he might be in like Leavenworth or something, like one of those ones in like Colorado or Nebraska where it's like, you want to talk about complaining about lack of sun, maybe go visit one of those places too, because it's just like, it is like the hardest time for the worst people, and he's there for life.
Yeah.
But what happened was, next man up is kind of and we'll get into that too. The Sinaloa Cartel is just a next man up philosophy, and one of those next men up was his son. And on January 6th, Dante blogged this, our guy Nadu blogged it. It's been kind of headline news coming out of the holidays, was that there was a warrant issued by a judge in the United States for extradition of El Chapo's son. So the Mexican authorities went in, captured, arrested El Chapo's son. Immediately, the cartel rose up. They're talking as many as 700 gunmen, armed people. And I mean armed to the fucking teeth. They had every type of, whatever our special forces have, they have it too. So they have like the full armor that you need. They have grenade launchers and rocket launchers that, shoulder mounted things that they shot at like military aircraft. They shot up a civilian plane. They had M16s, Berettas. They like any type of weapon that you could think of that you're like, "Cool, that's a badass army." the cartels have it.
And listen, like audio on a podcast right now is not doing this justice. So I first became aware of this a couple weeks ago reading Dante's blog, like you said. And we should link this in the description, Harry. Link Dante's blog. Some of the Twitter videos that Dante embedded in there of them, like people are legit on just a regular jetliner, like
fucking JetBlue.
Yes, just like a regular commercial jetliner.
You can hear a baby crying, and
yes, and they're just like their plane is just getting shot at, and they're just like they are on all fours, just taking cover. It is fucking terrifying. It's
horrifying.
Crazy.
Yeah, and it was like, wow, that was it was like immediate. It was like within minutes of him getting arrested, the town was taken over, and they were like blowing up buses. It was like a full-on invasion terrorist attack where if it wasn't labeled and you couldn't no label, no sound, just images, you're like, oh, this must be like Kiev, like a fucking war zone where cars are on fire, buildings are on fire, planes are getting shot up, the weaponry, the full armored personnel on both sides, and they were, because the cartel has so much power, specifically the Sinaloa Cartel. They're like, you know what? We're not only are we going after, we're just taking over this entire town. If you're in the military that was part of this operation, we're going after your fucking family. So that's what, they went, I think like 29 people were killed. They took hostages. They were burning down like army barracks and stuff in the area. And this was happening in the state capital. So not Mexico City, but the capital of that specific state in Mexico. So it was like full on war in the streets. And then it was eventually like, hey, like just let them go. And they did. So we had this,
which I couldn't believe. I wasn't updated to the story to that point because it was a standoff. Like they were just literally like, don't you fucking dare send El Chapo's son to the U.S. or it will be 10 times worse than what it is now. And it's like, holy fuck, how could it get worse? They're already killing all these innocent civilians. Right. Like they're going to take it to the next level. Yeah. And it was like a game of chicken, and it wasn't chicken. They weren't playing chicken. They were ruthless.
And they're known for that. Okay?
Yeah.
And it was, they're going after everyone. Okay. Like civilians. But they're also going after the families of people who are in the military. So it was like, holy, and they know, like they know everything. They know, if you're a colonel in the military and you're part of this operation who signed off on this, well, guess what? Your house is getting attacked. Yeah. And they have so many. There is an estimation that, and we'll get into like the structure of the Sinaloa Cartel, that there's like 100,000 members. 100,000. That's a fucking army. Okay.
That's a shit ton. Dude.
That is an absolute shit ton. So they took over this town. They said, I don't know how they came up with the number. They think it was as many as 700 people were causing mayhem in this battle over custody for Guzman. It's not a junior, but El Chapo's son. And then they get up there and they're like, all right, we're just fuck it. You're released. And the president of Mexico, okay, like the top guy, he's like, yeah, this is great. So his name is Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, and he's like AMLO as his like kind of nickname. So his initials make that acronym. And he said, surely the capture of one drug smuggler could not be more valuable than the lives of innocent civilians. And there's truth to that, okay? But at the same time, so you have like the president of a country. This is the guy who goes and meets with Biden, and he's met with Trump, and so he's on the world stage and just be like, yeah, fuck it, like let the cartels have their guy. Like that's the official policy of the state, was like, yeah, it's not worth all the carnage, turn over this guy. And that Mexican president, you can make an argument that he is the single most popular politician in his country in the world. So he's more popular than Biden is here, Macron in France.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At one point it's dipped a little bit because I think everybody dipped during COVID, but he still has like a 68% approval rating. Probably gone up after this, but there was a time pre-COVID that his approval rating was over 80%. Like this guy is like the most popular guy in Mexico. And he's just like, yeah, like, because it's like, I think it feels like the more you read about it, the more people in Mexico are just like, this is our reality. Like we are a narco state. And did you ever watch the show Narcos?
Dude, I haven't actually. And I mean, I obviously know the story of Pablo Escobar for the most part. I know the gist of it, I should say. And I don't know how much it stands to like the source material.
Yeah.
Because like I know they did spin-offs and whatnot. Right?
Yeah, but it's not even a spin-off. It's almost like a continuation of the story. So like Narcos season 1 was really about Pablo and his rise in becoming like the cocaine king of the 80s, and I think he was captured and killed in 94, or just killed in 94, I should say. And then just because you take the head off a snake doesn't mean like, oh, well, here's this multi-billion-dollar industry. Well, fuck it, and our top guy's gone. So then it goes into the Cali Cartel, who kind of slid into his power vacuum, and then I think season 3 was more like the origins of the Mexican cartel, or at least when they started becoming more and more powerful. In the 80s, and that's where El Chapo kind of got his start. The Sinaloa Cartel was really, they've been doing drugs in the drug trade forever, okay? So the United States banned marijuana, heroin, and cocaine right at the beginning of the 20th century. So like I think heroin and cocaine were banned officially because they used to be like literally in Coca-Cola, and there was like prescribed that like, oh, here, have some heroin as like a pain medication at your pharmacy. And they're like, it's probably not the best. This is highly addictive, terrible things for our country. So they banned them, and then people in Sinaloa are like, we got the perfect climate to grow that shit. So they started doing black market trading of drugs into the United States all the way back in like 1913. Okay, but they were, but it was like not like the primary predominant thing in the country, but there were people in that area growing poppies to produce heroin for over 100 years now. And then you fast forward into the mid 80s, that's when the Mexican cartels became almost more distributors than growers, because the cocaine would come up from Colombia. They would pay the Mexican cartels to like, hey, like here's your cut if you get it into the United States, get it over the border. It's your area, and they use that to become more and more wealthy. And then as the America and international pressure focused on Bogota, Colombia, like the producers of it, the Mexicans just like ran wild, and because they were not at war with the DEA and these other agencies the same way that the Cali Cartel and the principal Colombian manufacturers of it, Pablo Escobar, et cetera, they were allowed to kind of not grow unfettered, but more easily than their counterparts or their suppliers in Colombia, who were under constant pressure. And like our military was involved, our CIA, DEA, all those different agencies were focused primarily on Colombia, and Mexico really grew in power and wealth in that time. And the Sinaloa Cartel, there were 3 main cartels, and the Sinaloa Cartel, they were kind of warring with each other, and the Sinaloa Cartel emerged as the predominant power. And they did that basically because they don't really have a power structure. Okay, like El Chapo is the famous guy at the top, but they're not like this. If you think about like mob movies or things like that, where they have like the pyramid, right, of the capos and everything, it's like, oh, here's Vito Corleone at the top, and then like he has his network, right, of these different people underneath him. Theirs is more, they have a leadership, but it's kind of like everything is like a loose connection where they all work together, as opposed to like this top down. There is like, they have El Chapo, but he's not the central authority figure that, say, Pablo Escobar was in his cartel. It was more like he's the top guy, but it's very loose. So you take him out, someone else just slides in, and the show goes on. And the Sinaloa Cartel never really loses power because you can't pin them down, because it's impossible to pin down. And Vice News did this piece maybe like 4 or 5 months ago where they're showing these guys in the off the west coast of California, where they're in like a little, we call it a skiff, like a little motorboat in the ocean. Like if you think of Captain Phillips, where they, the Somalians come up to the boat, like a little boat like that, a little motorboat, little boat with a motor, detachable motor on the back. And they're picking up like this stuff floating in the ocean. It's ingredients for fentanyl, okay? and because you can't bring it the big ship into, so you put it on, you load it on the boat from China, okay, and then they're getting closer to Mexico. They dump all the illegal stuff off the side of the boat, and these other boats come in and just pick it up out of the ocean. So they do the same thing. They mask the guy's voice, where it's like, are you part of the Sinaloa Cartel? See, yes. Okay, like who is, they go out in the ocean, pick up these packages, basically drop them on the beach, and someone else comes and picks them up. They're like, well, who's picking that up? Well, we don't know. But we've been given instruction to take our boat, pick that stuff up, put it over there. They don't know the guy who's picking it up. So like that's the level. It's like even if you capture them, you can't put the whole network together because they don't know the guy picking it up. That guy drops it somewhere else who puts it in the factory, and then that gets sent to a distributor or a trucker, and that, it's like this whole network that is linked, but nobody knows all the steps.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to pin them down. And another reason why the Sinaloans kind of took off, where their rivals got battered down a little bit, was A, because of that network, but B, though, there's been open warfare, okay, with battling with the Mexican government for a long time, since really heightened since the 90s. But Sinaloans, they're like, yes, we're going to be armed to the teeth, but we're also just going to buy everybody. All the politicians, all the enforcement agencies, the local police, fucking everybody we're going to be lining their pockets. And it's the old, they use this line in that season one of Narcos with Pablo Escobar saying it, but it's plata or plomo, which is silver or lead. So you're either on our side and you'll be made wealthy, we're lining your pockets, but if you stand up to us, we're just going to fucking kill you and your family and everybody else. And so those are your options. So most people, which can hardly blame them, take the money, and the drug trade goes on and on and on, and it goes into our country as well, obviously. So it's always talking about like, hope drugs are coming in through our southern border. People are coming in through the southern border. What are we going to do about this? And it's like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, all these places. Well, where do you think the Mexican cartels are getting their guns? Texas. Okay. They go right. So drugs are going over the border. Guns are coming back. So they have like, dual citizens or American citizens who are working for the cartel, because there's no, I shouldn't say no, but restricted or less restricted gun laws in Texas. So hey, here's $20,000. Go into that place, buy us M16s. Okay, sure, no problem. And they can go to these gun fairs, and then they just sell them back to the cartels or give them back to the cartels. And so guns come over this way, guns go south. And so it's like you just can't ever so it's like we're actively, not only are we buying the drugs as citizens, but then we also have private businesses selling heavy arms to they're going specifically over Texas and the Arizona border. They say most predominantly going back to the cartels so they can further enforce, or fight and battle against the authorities with guns that are coming from the United States. And then we put in laws like 7-8 years ago to help deter some of that. And they said like the gun running and the gun smuggling, it got a little bit more difficult. So they just went to Colombia. Because Colombia, one of the greatest militaries in the world still is Israel. And Israel has a company that has a gun manufacturer in Colombia. So they run the guns up through Latin America, and they have this different type of, if they can't get an M16, we'll just get the Israeli equivalent. We'll ship it up here from Bogota. And that's basically how so that no matter what, there's always arms coming in, dollars coming in, and they're able to buy politicians. They're able to intimidate all the townspeople. There was a great documentary probably 8-10 years ago. I'm blanking on the name of it now, but it was like this old guy.
Cartel Land?
Maybe.
No, I know. I that's a great one that I've seen.
Is it about the old guy who kind of looks like a Pancho Villa kind of character? Where
they had a vigilante group?
Yes.
Yep. That's
okay. It's an awesome, and it's like he said,
Michoacan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're battling with the cartels, and they're like, you fall in love with this old guy who's like putting together this group to take on the cartels. And then like the documentary ends like, oh yeah, that guy was killed. Like
Yeah.
like white text on black screen, where it's like at the very end of the documentary, like, yeah, the cartel got to that guy.
Yeah.
That we made the documentary
And
about.
this guy like was part of a group that was like trying to take them on. And then
Right.
like you find out like a lot of people in his group were being bought by like them.
Yep.
And it's like it's a vicious cycle where like even the people in the military like might be
Yes.
coming from the inside. You just don't know who is a double agent and who isn't.
And I
which is
think you have
fucking
to assume at this
crazy.
point that everybody is.
Yeah.
That and like, so how do you solve this problem? It's like, well, you can't, because there's too much money, and they've become like a truly international corporation now, where they're the Sinaloans are credited is a weird word, but credited with introducing meth to Europe. So they're shipping things into Europe. They're importing fentanyl and other things from China. They're shipping out meth and other, some of these more like kind of pharmaceutical drugs and party drugs to Southeast Asia. So, to Thailand, places like that. So if you're out of, your MDMA or whatever it is, how did this get to Thailand? Well, there's a good chance that it was manufactured in Mexico and sent over. So it's like they have this global underworld where they are the kings of the drug trade, and nobody can seem to figure out a way to take them down. And then it's like, hey, like this is like, to me, this is like a flex, where it's like, no, you're not taking our guys anymore. Mm-hmm. USA, Mexico, Mexican government, whoever. You do that, these are the consequences. Carnage, fucking carnage. It's almost like it's a civil war.
Yeah, it's just crazy that they could get that many people aligned like that, right?
Especially as they describe the organization as kind of a looser network, looser connection, but I think they all ultimately know, like, where their bread is buttered. So it's like, hey, like, you get a call, you better be on the street now.
But you know what I mean, though? Like, what's the kick down to all these people? Especially if there's 100,000. Like, what's a kick down that he's making everyone happy where, like, you're following
Dude,
all this command?
he's Robin Hood. He's Robin Hood.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, though? Like, you hear so many stories about, like, for instance, like the old Italian mob and, like, how it's like, this guy there might be dissension within this group and he wanted a piece. Like, I don't know. It just kind of seems like, I mean, I'm sure this is not the case, but it just kind of seems so unilateral, like everyone's on board.
Well, and I think everyone is on board, because it was at a time where it was more Wild West than it is now, because they've consolidated power so much, and the other groups kind of periodically come up. And there's one that started with a Z, that they come up and they kind of challenge the Sinaloas, and then the Sinaloas put them down. Mm-hmm. And then another group will like, hey, we got it, and then the Sinaloas put them down. And that is kind of like the cycle where they're always on top, and sometimes there's challengers, and then they get smashed. And then there's also been evidence where they have, people have testified that they're working with the DEA. Okay, so it's like, you leave us alone, but we'll help you get our rivals. So you have a feather in your cap, like, hey, we got this drug guy, and it's like they're fucking small potatoes compared to, or they're a rival on the come up, being like, hey, you know who we could use to take down our biggest rival? The DEA. And then we can continue to go unfettered here. But that's another like an example using Pablo Escobar. Okay, he was an elected official. He was so popular in Medellin that he became elected to like their equivalent of the Senate. And I want to say he was going to run for president, because that just became, he was just like a captain of industry at that point. Be like Rockefeller running, because this is what we do. And we were poor before, and there was violence before, but now there's all that same, we're still poor, but maybe a little bit less poor, but still poor. And this guy who is causing all the violence, well, he's also building soccer fields. He's doing all these other things. He's a humanitarian while killing people on the side. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's kind of what's going on in Mexico too, is that there's so much money that and you'd rather have, I think everybody would prefer just peace. Okay. Like, let's just have a stable economy, good jobs, families safe, all that. Well, that seems like that's just out the window. So people would prefer to have like predictable carnage, where like you can theoretically avoid it as opposed to just mass chaos everywhere. And so they get on board with the Sinaloas, because Sinaloas, They might go to war with the government, but that's better than having like, and you look at Chicago, okay? Like they had that. One of the reasons they say that the gang violence has gotten so out of control the last 15, 20 years
is because they put away the leaders.
Yes.
And that's what I mean. Like,
yes.
How is it so,
right?
You know, like
there's no more like power grabs.
Yes, and everything kind of fell apart. That's what you hear. I mean, I've had obviously police force on before, and I've asked that question, and you know, I asked Gary McCarthy that. I forgot what his response was, but it was more or less like, I've heard that, but I don't know. There's nothing there to back that up. Yeah. But
that is, they think that, you know, you take the head off a snake. Well, it's a Medusa, all right? Yeah. A Medusa is where you cut the head off and like 8 other heads rise up and they all battle each other, okay? Yeah. And so, and it might just be like, and I'm sure the Sinaloans supply them, you know, these different places in Chicago that are, these different gangs in Chicago do some of their distribution, but they just don't even care. And so it's like at that level, they don't give a shit. But I think below, you know, as you get closer to the hub, there were 4 founders of the Sinaloa Cartel. El Chapo was one of them. The other guy, Zapata, something like that. He's still like at large, but he's always been like more of a behind the scenes guy than El Chapo was. Like El Chapo, like everyone, he's got a fucking great nickname, right? Like El Chapo is fucking awesome. Yeah. I don't even know what it means, but it gets burned into your head.
It does.
But he had this other kind of, it was like they were the last who left. Now this other guy, he's still there, but it's like no one really knows what his role is or where he is, but like ultimately, like they know he's still at large. And I feel like maybe he's the one kind of keeping this thing together. And maybe this organization has been really running this way for almost 40 years now. So there's enough proof of concept, and you could say like, hey, like don't rock the boat. Like we're all getting rich. Like let's just keep our thing going and everything, you know, and then, but it's all, maybe they feel more powerful than ever because they're like, yeah, you're not taking any more of our top guys. Like it's just, you want to extradite El Chapo's son for political gain or whatever. No. We will light this whole town on fire. And it worked.
That's what they did, yeah.
Yeah.
And I should say, the Michoacan is the city. The auto defenses is what the vigilante group was.
Okay.
Auto defenses. Yep. It's a really good doc. It's called Cartel Land.
Is it still on Netflix?
I just looked it up and I didn't find it, but it's really good.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, you did spoil the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And they also
follow like a 10-year-old doc.
Yeah, they also follow an Arizona border recon group.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of these like
coyotes.
These white fucking redneck
rancher
dudes.
Guys.
Yeah, who like
enough already.
Yeah, like it's crazy.
But like that's part of the thing too, where it's like these cartels have gotten so powerful and so rich that they've diversified. Okay, so you want to know why all the resorts are so safe? Because the cartels make them safe. Because they know that that's a major source of revenue for them. That they don't want. They want U.S. dollars and dollars from all these places coming in. So that industry will dry up if the people don't feel safe to travel there. So those places are on lockdown, and it's an understanding, kind of like how we talked about with the Vegas episode, where there's like, hey, like this is a cash cow. Let's make sure Vegas is safe on the streets. Yeah, and it's like that's the same thing with all these different places in Cancun, wherever. That let's keep these places and these resorts are off limits because we're all making money. The other thing he got into is avocados. Okay, so when they started legalizing weed in Colorado, California, Illinois, Massachusetts, all these different places, that really ate into the cartels' revenue because they were sending a shit ton of weed over the border to major populous states, New York, etc. So they're like, well, what are we going to do? We can't even make that much money on weed anymore. Let's dig the weed plants up and plant avocados. We got white girls doing avocado toast up in the United States for, they're charging $18 for a piece of bread. Yeah. Okay, so they got in the avocado trade, and it's also just a way to wash your money too. So then they're doing human trafficking and get people over the borders. They have like, think of everything that could possibly come out of Mexico. We should have my guy on at some point.
Who's that?
I'm not going to say his name just in case he doesn't want to come on, but I've become friendly with him, and his great grandfather was the president of Mexico in like 1918, something like that. Okay, very distinguished family. But as you can imagine, in Mexico, governments are always getting toppled, especially back then. He was assassinated.
Oh, fuck.
His entire family had to live in exile in Spain for like a full generation. They come back, they still have a ton of money. And there was a book, I can't remember the name of the book, but there was like 5 families in Mexico that ruled the entire country. And, so one guy had like all the manufacturing. There's, Mexico has a ton of oil. Texas originally had a lot of oil. I'm sure they still do. But Mexico is the same thing. So you had one family kind of ran like some manufacturing thing. One family ran, they had basically, but like 5 families controlled the entire country for 100-something years. And this guy was from one of those families. And he will talk about how he looks more like an indigenous Mexican person with dark hair, dark features. He said that he's the only one in his family who really looks like that. And so they tease him and call him El Negro, like the black, okay? Like you're the dark features. Everybody else, okay, in these families, this elitist class of Mexico that run all their industry, and it's still kind of that way. It's less now than it was 40 years ago, but still kind of that way. They can all trace their ancestors back to like Spain. Like they came over like after Christopher Columbus and Cortez, and they conquered the Aztecs and they set up these colonies. So it's like, yeah, my family has been in Mexico for 400 years. And it's like, it's like, that's how deeply they have like, and this is something America never really had, which is a caste system. And it's like big in India. It's still big in England. And it's different societies, all over cultures all over the world, where it's like you cannot become wealthy. Like you have like a literal glass ceiling to how high you can ascend. Like there are people in England today that, based upon who their family is, they can't get into Oxford or some of these schools. It just doesn't matter if you're a genius, you can't get in.
Yeah.
And Mexico has that as well, and that's really prevalent all over Latin America, which is why you have like they just can't quite grow because there's not enough of an incentive in capitalism. There's too much corruption and different things. But it's like there really are like 2 classes of people, and it's just fascinating to listen to this guy kind of break it down, like how the hierarchy in Mexico actually works.
Yeah, that could be pretty good.
Yeah, it would be very interesting. Yeah, he's a very, very sharp guy.
It also makes me think, dude, like, we talk about underbellies a lot.
Yeah.
In this country, like who we on this show, this is year 5.
Yeah.
We've almost done 1,000 episodes.
It's a lot of fucking
and we
episodes.
did a lot of episodes on the Epstein underbelly.
Mm-hmm.
We've done a lot of we've done a lot of episodes on, the pharmaceutical underbelly, shit like that.
Yep.
It's kind of wild that nobody talks about this cartel underbelly as much as it should. Right?
Well, totally. Well, it's like how many...
Because that there is multiple people in this country getting on the other end of this.
Totally.
I'm saying people who are, positions of power, I would bet.
Well,
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. And it's like, look, we had this, we talked about the Sacklers, right? The Sackler family with their opioid crisis. We talked, I don't know what year we did that, but that was a major problem. And then the government really did crack down on pharmaceuticals and try to get to the bottom of this opioid crisis. Well, they cracked down on it, and then who stepped in? Mexican cartels. Because like we said, the marijuana trade, they were taking a bath on that. They weren't making it, so they were eating into their profits. Well, let's get heavier into opioids. So they're producing heroin and they're importing stuff to make fentanyl because that's easier to make up your profit loss from what you lost on legalization of weed to these different states. So they're like, well, we're not just going to like make less money. Let's get Americans hooked on these opioids because the people are craving it because of this manufactured opioid crisis by big pharma. Mm-hmm. And then when the government cracks down on big pharma, who steps in? The illegal drug trade, because the demand has already been created by big pharma. So like, I think you're right. Like there is this underbelly where they all, it's everybody kind of benefits. And it's, when we talked about on Tuesday about the immigration thing. It's like, because we have a population problem. So it's like, no, this is a problem that makes headlines, and the news media loves to talk about border crises and all that. But I don't think anybody really wants to do anything, because you got the drug trades making people a ton of money. You have the media is able to basically sell clicks on these crises at the border. Both sides of the aisle know that we need immigration to kind of keep this thing going. I mean our country, because we're not producing enough babies. We're below replacement level for our own fertility rate, so we need people to kind of keep it propped up and keep it running. So nobody really wants to do anything. Same thing, those gun dealers in Arizona and Texas, they don't want to see that border close up. They're probably making a fuck ton of money selling guns that they don't care where they end up. So it's just like there's too much money to be had by everyone to anyone really want to do anything about it. So I just think, you want to talk about underbelly, it's just like, yeah, this is a problem, but we're all benefiting from this problem, so nobody's going to do shit about it. That's how it looks to me anyways.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's going to, yeah. I'm sure we could do this show in 10 years and nothing will change.
Unfortunately, you're probably right.
Just different names.
Unfortunately, you're probably right. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. That's it for today. We will be back tomorrow. We will continue our trek. We are it's February, so the 28th is the election. So we're closing in another candidate tomorrow. So we'll see you tomorrow for another Chicago specific episode. And if you're not into those, we'll see you Monday for another draft. See you guys tomorrow.